Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever time it is that you're joining me for this video. Thanks once again for clicking on the PenBoyRoy Fountain Pen Review channel. The subject of today's video is going to be opening up or tightening our nib tines. I'm going to start with showing you how I like to open up the nib tines. Sometimes when we receive our pens and we write with them out of the box, they write very dry. And that might not be an ink flow problem. It might just be that the tines are really, really tight. And I see this happen more often than not. Now, I've seen before the technique of opening up our tines by pressing down and essentially flexing the nib tines until they open up, and then you do it until it stays open. I'm not a fan of that. Some people do it. If it works for you, great. However, I like to show a method that seems just a little bit less aggressive. Now, for this method, what we need to do is we need to actually remove the nib and feed from the pen. And this is the safest way to do it, I think. Now, I want to always mention safety first when it comes to our nibs. Maybe not this one in particular, since it's a sacrificial lamb. And I always want to just make sure I'm not going too far with anything. I want to do everything in small increments. Now, for this, I'm going to need a couple of brass shims. I think 3 would be enough. So what I'm going to do to start is I'm going to floss the brass shim in between the nib tines. Now, if your nib tines are really tight, as this one is, you'll feel a lot of resistance getting it in there, okay? And then I'm just gonna leave it here for a few seconds. Now, I do also see how some people, once they get it in here, they'll pull in both directions to open the tines. I'm not a big fan of that because I find that in doing that, what ends up happening is the tip of your tines ends up with a Y shape, and then you gotta just fix that. So instead of doing that, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna keep stuffing the tines with brass shims. And if the tines are tight, it might take some work to get it in there. But once it gets in there, I got 2 brass shims in between the tines, and I'm going to let it sit for a little bit, maybe 30 seconds, a minute. Okay, after doing 2, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the brass shims out. Now this pen's not inked up because I don't want to ink up my fingers while I'm doing this video for you. I'm going to test it, see how it is. Maybe it's not wet enough. Then I'm going to take it again, and I'm going to floss 1. I'm on video, so I'm getting all nervous because I'm under pressure. I'm going to floss 1 brass shim. I'm going to squeeze in a 2nd brass shim. And this time I want to get a 3rd brass shim in, so instead of struggling to get it in, I'm just going to put it in between the 2 outside like a sandwich. And I'm going to just sit here. And I'm going to wait. I'm going to let it sit. I'm going to let the tension gently spread open the tines evenly up and down. I don't want a Y shape happening with the tip of my tines. And then I'm going to remove them all, and then I'm going to test again. What I find in my experience, 3 to 4 shims is enough to improve the ink flow to a satisfactory amount. Okay? I'm going to like it, or if I don't like it, then I'm going to add up to a 4th. I don't really think 5 is necessary. But after you add a 4th one, let the nib sit for a minute or 2, so that way the tension keeps it pressed open. Okay, so now let's say on the flip side, we have a nib that is too wide open. It's just you write and it's just drizzling all over the page. Here's what we're going to do. Now this one I find we can do with the nib in the nib collar, in the nib unit. I'm going to take 1 shim. I'm going to shimmy it in between the 2 tines. And what I want to do is basically I want to kind of cause the tines to overlap each other. So I'm going to twist, just like so. See how I'm gently causing the tines to overlap each other? And then I'm going to do it again in the opposite direction to make things even. I'm going to twist and hold. And then I'm going to come back to the middle. Now this is where the loop comes in. I have to make sure that I check to make sure I didn't misalign my own tines, and then I'm going to write. See how that feels. I like it. Maybe I don't like it. Maybe I need to repeat the process. Just get it in there. Trying to squeeze it in. Snug fit. Okay, so I want to tighten again. I'm going to twist like a key and hold it so that the tines overlap each other. and then I'm going to go again in the opposite direction. Hold, and then I'm going to check for misalignments using my loop. And if I did happen to misalignment, which could very well happen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just make sure that I use my brass shim and I realign it. So if you guys didn't see that video, you could check that video out. I'm going to leave it in a card so you can click at the end how to fix misaligned tines. But that's just a quick video on how I like to open up my tines and also tighten them. You could also do the tightening the same way, taking the nib out of the collar. And same thing, you just shimmy it through. If this nib looks like a mess, it's because I did so much experimenting with it. I don't want to use an actually good nib. And you can do the same thing. You put it in, and then you turn it like a key. Now, what I always notice is it's better to leave it in the collar because the deeper it is, the more aggressive it becomes. And I want to just eliminate that much aggression when it comes to tightening the tines or moving the tines or manipulating the tines and whatnot. Okay? So that was just my way of using brass shims to open up and reduce ink flow with the tines and whatnot. I hope you found it helpful. Thanks again for watching. Love you guys. Be well, be safe.